Hello, everyone, and welcome to Poets and Quants' top MBA for Entrepreneurship event. I'm Christy Blyzeffer. I'm your host, and today I'm speaking with a couple of MBA entrepreneurs telling us about their companies and why they went to business school. Thank you all for watching, and thanks to our guests for being here. To start, if each of you want to introduce yourself and your company, where you're based, your school, and a fun fact about you or your company. Jose, let's go ahead and start with you.
Yes, thanks, Christy. Hi, everybody. My name is Jose Cerecedo. I'm originally from Mexico. Right now, I live in San Antonio, Texas. And I went to school to WP Carey Business School in Arizona State University in Phoenix. My company is called Epitafio. And a fun fact about myself or my company is that thanks to my company or my time in the company, I was able to get certified as a master mezcalier. That is kind of like a sommelier for mezcal. So it's been pretty fun and something I think unique about that experience.
Well, that sounds actually a very great perk, Tova, how about you?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Tova Feinberg. I am based in St. Louis, Missouri, which is where I went to get my MBA at WashU Olin Business School. My company is called Vertigreens. We are a hydroponic farming company. And a fun fact, officially planted our first seeds a few days ago. So we're excited to see those sprout.
Oh, that's great. That's something to look forward to.
Yes.
I love a good garden for sure. Excuse me, Jordan, how about you? Introduce yourself, your school, your company, and a fun fact.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jordan Shamir. I'm currently living in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I went to Ross, so University of Michigan, for my MBA. And right now what I'm working on is I help co-found a company called Yofi. So what we really focus on is digital identity. So we first started off with like sneaker bots, concert bots, but helping people demystify who is online. So kind of very much in the digital identity, understanding who your consumers are, intentionality, and the best way to interact with them. A fun fact about me, I've never lived in the same place for more than 4 years. So I've bounced around a bunch.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Tova, let's go back to you. Why don't you just share a little bit more about the startup?
Sure.
What problem you're trying to solve? How old is it? How many employees? That kind of thing.
Sure. So the company Vertigreens started during my MBA tenure. I just graduated 2022. So really the research and the foundation started January of 2021. Really the biggest thing that we're trying to solve is that it's very hard for chefs to source very niche, nice ingredients. So usually chefs have to cook their dishes based on what they can get versus what they actually envision and want to cook. So we're trying to fix the supply chain of these ingredients and having it on a localized scale, but on a national level. So we are actually having these hydroponic vertical farms that are in shipping containers. And our goal is to have multiple of these on site and then have multiple sites throughout the US would be the full scaled out approach. But it's really to just have chefs be able to cook what they want and having the freshest, highest quality ingredients.
Yeah. And Jordan, same question. Tell us a little bit more detail.
Yeah. So what we were able to find is like pre-Ross, a lot of us worked, or me and my co-founders worked in e-commerce. And one of the things that we struggled with is we actually spend a lot of time and resources trying to understand our consumers, right? What do people like? What do they buy? And one of the things that we saw, which obviously COVID kind of pushed from an e-commerce perspective, is like people aren't always who they say they are online, right? Like we all have like 3 or 4 different email accounts. And if I can use my Gmail account instead of like my Umish to get 10, 15% off, I'm going to do that, right? Mm-hmm. And so what that does is it creates a really large cascading impact to the brand around like how many of my actual accounts are unique compared to just total, and how am I making business decisions based off that? So what we've been able to do is help brands be able to say, well, like these are how many customers I have, these are the amount of unique customers, and this is the best way I can interact with them. Because one of the things that we see is that personalization kind of stops at the level of like, hey, Jordan, or hey, first name, but the products and recommendations you get aren't really just personalized. So really helping brands kind of create that community from all those digital touch points and data that you get from consumers.
Yeah, very good. And Jose, a little bit more detail, please.
Yeah, so my company was, because I actually went to the process of selling the company during my MBA, a hospitality group where we had a restaurant, food trucks, a tasting room for mezcal, And that's how the fun fact came there. And our main goal was, when we designed everything, was to promote kind of like the cooking of Mexican food with local ingredients, local spirits, local beers, local, all that type, like sourcing from the closest and most local regions, and to promote that regional food in the part of Mexico I'm from, and work with small suppliers, farmers, etc., etc. So it was a great experience, and it was actually through the process of my MBA where I went through the process of selling the business, and so that's how I ended up here.
Yeah. Jordan, do you want to tell us a little bit about kind of the timing, the timeline of the journey? Did you have this idea before you went to business school? Tell us about, kind of getting it off the ground.
Yeah, so I got in round one, so I'm still an MBA 2 at Ross. So kind of the genesis of it came from the application process, like being very reflective, thinking about where you want to go. Applications suck, right? But there is some benefit to it, right? And so once I got accepted, one of the things I kind of thought about in like my lame duck term between work and going is like, well, I really want to go start something, right? Like this is something I'm really passionate about building, right? Creating something. And we created a couple different ideas, but this was the one that really kind of worked, right? And so through the entire process, it started off with like, okay, this is a side project. This is pretty cool. We started getting more traction, better understanding. And then it started to really kind of evolve and grow. And so at the end of last year, we got our first clients. We closed the fundraising round in March, and Ross has been incredible through that entire process, like even working with like ZLI through the summer and having them, just some of the best like entrepreneurial minds in Michigan, just meet with me every week just to pick my brain, pick their brain. It's been exceptional.
Yeah. Jose, what about your timeline, and when the kind of idea generated?
Yeah. So I come from a family business background. So I think all my life, and my dad was an entrepreneur. So for me, it was like, well, there's no other thing, right? I need to go and start my own. So I started my business, this business, on my last year of college. And I did that for 7 years, counting my first year of the MBA. That was when I kind of like ended up selling the company. So it was actually till the end where I knew there was the opportunity to sell the business that I said, you know what, I want to go and do an MBA and to kind of like live the experience and refresh and kind of like have a new inspiration, right? So my timeline was, I started in college and did that for 6 years, decided to go for my MBA and then sell it in the middle of it.
Oh, very good. And Tova, how about you?
Yeah, so I mean, I always knew I wanted to enter the food industry, and so did my co-founder. We realized, the importance of food, the power that food has on everyone, and really just how food can bring community together. And so we actually had an opportunity during 2021 to intern with a company called Freight Farms, where we really got to learn about ag tech and kind of the power of ag tech and how we really need to be disruptive and change the agricultural industry. And so really it was newer. I was actually looking into marketing for a big CPG company when I was in my MBA, and then I fell in love. And from there, I couldn't turn back. So he and I have been building this up, and we have our first clients locked in, we have our first seeds growing. And so we should be able to push out some samples and build up our client base within the next few months. And we can't wait to see what happens.
Awesome. Jose, for the next question for you, tell me a little bit more about why you decided to get an MBA. Were you considering other graduate degrees? Did you consider that you didn't need that kind of extra business education? Just talk us through that thought process and why you chose the school you did.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, it was when I saw the opportunity to sell the business, the MBA made sense because I knew I wanted to kind of like stay, do something maybe different, get inspiration. So I felt like, doing the MBA is going to be kind of like a fun experience. And I really wanted to kind of have that back to school, big cohort, meet new people, right? So in my mind, it sounded like a holiday, right? Like, I'm going to, after the business, I'm going to go. And it was, the first year was super challenging. The second year, it definitely has been one of my best years of my life. Just fun overall. The second year of my MBA was amazing. So that's why when I was kind of like choosing the program, ASU made a lot of sense. At that time, they were already kind of like promoting very heavily their #1 in innovation thing. So that kind of like caught my eye when I was looking to different business schools to apply. And then through the application process, the offer they gave me, the location, a couple of things, right? The size of the cohort, And I spoke with grad students, with alumni. It just kind of like, I felt it was the best fit for me and what I was looking. But I consider a couple of other schools. I got offers from a couple of other schools, but at the end I felt like ASU was the best fit for me, and I'm very grateful, and I had an amazing experience.
Yeah. Tova, why an MBA and why your school?
You know, I worked in everything within food industry, hotels, restaurants, catering, and I was working up the ladder, and I realized I just hit this like plateau where I needed the business fundamentals to really push forward. So kind of call a quarter life crisis. I moved away from Boston, moved back home to St. Louis, and they were like, check out WashU. I was like, you know, like, let me just start this journey. So I go and I interview, fell in love immediately. You know, it's a great program. They started the global immersion. So having that global experience within business, being able to travel the world, you know, just the way that the classes are structured, it's very immersive, a lot of hands-on experiential learning. Having a cohort only being 92 people in my class just really was able to hear all the diverse mindsets and really understand kind of different perspectives within business. You have a wide range of ages as well, but you're not overwhelmed with the class of 600. So it's a very immersive experience. And I wouldn't change it for the world. It was a crazy 2 years. I was a COVID student, but the way WashU handled it, I was able to still be in person and have this global immersion experience, and I couldn't be happier. I wouldn't change it.
Yeah. Jordan, why an MBA and why Ross?
I think for me, the why MBA was, I loved what I was doing from a career perspective. I was in product management. I was traveling the world, probably traveling a little bit more than I would have liked to. But ultimately, I wanted to go back and learn, right? I wanted to kind of take that next step. Like I felt like I was a little bit of plateauing, kind of when you read that juxtaposition from work where I'm just doing a bunch of work, but I'm not necessarily learning. And so ultimately it caused me to go back to do my MBA. And Ross, it's always been about the people, right? The people at Ross have always been super incredible. And I would say for all the schools I applied to, it felt like Ross wanted me, right? Like whenever I talked to students, they would respond really quickly. They would, you know, invite you to things, just the culture. And beyond that, like one of the things that was super enticing was I wanted to go somewhere I could be 120% involved in what I'm doing. And so that was a huge deciding factor for me compared to, you know, other schools, let's say in Boston or New York. Is in Ann Arbor, you're fully enveloped in the same neighborhood, right? Like a lot of us in Ann Arbor at Ross, like live a mile away from each other. We're all neighbors, right? So really being able to develop that community and friendship, and it's been hard to beat, right? Like with faculty and students, it's been pretty phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Tova, you know, what are some of the highlights from your program? You talked about the global immersion, but what are some of the others?
Sure. I think some of my highlights, I'll go into a very small one. I entered into the entrepreneurship tract, and one of the exercises I did with my professor, Doug Villehard, was this wallet exercise. You take a piece of paper and you're given a few minutes to design a wallet, and you present why you're designing, what problems you're solving. And really just like understanding that you need to understand your customer, building out this market. And then you're seeing the statistics of like 40% of startups fail because there's no market, and really just getting you thinking and engaged with that hands-on learning. Like that, for me, the best way to learn is by doing. So just having some small like memory like that was one of my biggest highlights from the program. Of course, the global immersion experience that I mentioned, but also being a TA for a course. I was a TA for an undergraduate course for a freshman year that's just like beyond boundaries and capitalism for good. So really teaching students like what entrepreneurship is all about. Like it's, you know, you're going to have a problem that you want to solve, but your problem when you're starting a startup is going to evolve and change an innumerable amount of times, because as you're doing your customer discovery and speaking with people, just showing just students who are 18 years old that like the way that the mindset that you should have when you're an entrepreneur, you don't have to have an idea and then just run with it. There's so many nuances and pieces to it. So that whole experience has been great, and actually, you know, just brought in my mindset more. And I learned even though I was a TA. So just small memories like that were some of my biggest highlights during the MBA program.
Oh, very good. Jordan, how about you? Highlights from Ross?
I think one of the biggest highlights have been, so Ross puts on a Michigan Entrepreneurial Challenge through like our Zell-Lurie Institute, like Entrepreneurship Institute, and being able to win the Zell-Lurie Institute was great, right? So you get great funding, right? So you get about $25,000 or $20,000 in undiluted cash, but even better was just the alumni network. So many people were reaching out being like, hey, I really love what you're doing. I can't really help, but here to support, or hey, I can help and support in this way. And just really tapping into that network of like, holy crap, like there's a lot of people around and the brand like really stands there. But I think one of the biggest things has been beyond that is there's just a huge, robust ecosystem of entrepreneurs on campus. So like even meeting up with undergrads, like there's this thing that we call like entrepreneurial power hour that's hosted by a kid named Bobby. And he's done such an incredible job just bringing all of these kids across these different schools at Michigan together, you know, right? Like MBA, undergrad, and just brainstorming and sharing ideas, which has been pretty awesome just to see what people are building, but also like us being around, having a little bit more work experience, being able to actually provide guidance of saying like, yeah, you can be entrepreneurs, right? Like out of undergrad, like there's nothing to stop you, right? So it's been pretty amazing.
Yeah. Jose, how about highlights from ASU?
I think for me, it was the kind of like the clubs and the events that the MBA class has. I think everybody gets very involved, and there's always a club organizing something. And we have my cohort was 120, right? So it's a nice size where there's diversity, but there's also everybody knows each other. So that was one. And I think that the competitions, right? Something maybe Jordan already mentioned a little bit, but we had the BCIC competition and other competitions from other schools, and just going, competing, meeting other folks doing their MBAs. Those were kind of like amazing experiences during the MBA.
Jose, you mentioned that you sold your company during your MBA. Were there any things in the program that helped kind of get it to that level, or are you starting on a new idea? Is there anything in your MBA program that is kind of going to kind of help lead to a launch or a sale, or helps you along the way?
Yeah, I think there were two courses or two classes that really helped me. One was my negotiations class, and the professor was amazing. I think that's kind of like one of the top favorites of all the alumni, the Ned Wellman's class of negotiations there. It was a great class because I was actually in that negotiation process when I took it. And then I also had an entrepreneurial finance class that really helped me with when you're selling the business, the valuation of your company, right? Especially when you're not like a big company, you don't have stocks, right? How do you kind of like put future value of your company in current sales? So those were two, entrepreneurial finance class and the negotiations at the MBA level, really helped me specifically for what I was living with my business. So they were amazingly helpful. Yeah.
Very good. Tova, how about you? What what in your MBA kind of impacted your startup, from professor, a class, an accelerator? What do you think worked really well for you?
Sure. I mean, there are multiple components within the program. Definitely just the entrepreneurship track in general. The way it was set up, led by Doug Billhart, it's very systematic, like going through the phases of ideation, really building out a business plan, working with the team to do your customer discovery up to the point that you're ready to pitch with investors. So really just going throughout those 2 years, being able to focus on the whole picture. There's also the Scandalera Center, which is a great resource for entrepreneurs here on campus. It's the center of innovation and entrepreneurship. So all the competitions we were able to participate in, events, being able to connect with alumni, since WashU is very close knit, and being in St. Louis is a really big entrepreneurial scene. So lots of support. It's, St. Louis is kind of #1 for ag tech as well. So from WashU, being connected to the ag tech societies. So really just the program as a whole has a bigger picture and all the resources that you get from WashU. Definitely.
And Jordan.
I think for me, from a class perspective, the biggest class was managing people in a leadership course, like taught by Lindy Greer, because it was one of those things where you realize how important culture is when you're forming a company, even if it's a 2-person company, 3-person company, and like to be able to learn that live while going through and building a team, right? So we were actively hiring and scaling out. So understanding, okay, well, how do we eliminate bias? How do we hire properly? How do we expand beyond what we're doing? And starting to take that, not just from a conceptual perspective, but actually applying it directly, was one of the most interesting things, because like I had no idea what I was doing, right? Like these are new things to learn. So having someone that's an expert kind of guide us on that was massive. Then the other thing was being part of like the Zell Lurie Commercial Fund. So it's a VC fund that us students are able to take part of. And this was super helpful because at the same time I was kicking off our pre-seed round. So we were raising from VCs and investors. So kind of getting that understanding of what it's like to sit on the other side of the table and other side of the desk was super helpful, right? Like I knew what questions to ask. I knew what questions I was going to be asked based off knowing what questions I asked. And so those were like an incredible moment because it just helped us prepare just holistically, right? And I'm sure you guys feel the same way, but like once you're so focused on something, you just pick up everything by inertia, right? Everything just kind of ties back to what you're doing. So it was really just holistic.
Yeah. Jordan, do you have, was there an entrepreneur who inspired you or somebody even within the program that proved, very motivational?
I think it was everyone, right? Like it's going to be a little bit of a corny answer, but it just was the support system, right? Like people were so invested in what we were doing. Like even when we made hoodies, like our friends bought hoodies, my friends are asking what we were doing, and just like knowing that you're not alone, because like I'm sure everyone knows like entrepreneurship is a roller coaster, right? Day by day, hour by hour. And so just having people there support you and really bolster and believe in what you're doing and give you, feedback and advice. Like I remember our first pitch, I sent it out to like 5-6 people and, got emails the next day and got like feedback, and the community was really what kind of gave us the motivation to keep pushing.
Yeah. Jose, what about you? Anybody, particularly inspiring for you?
I mean, I think for me, it was my dad. As I mentioned previously, I come from a family business background. My dad was an entrepreneur. So I've always had him mentoring me. He passed away recently. So I think I owe him a lot of my mindset, my entrepreneurial mindset, and kind of like just encouragement to go out and do it to him. And in school, I think I would say similar to Jordan, like your cohort, your friends. At the same, I started my business with 2 of my best friends in Mexico, and we ended up, we sold the business, and we were still very good friends. So that was lucky. I had amazing support of my best friends, and it was a great experience for the 3 of us. And so I think I owe them a lot to them too.
Yeah. Tova, how about you?
Honestly, it's a combination of both answers. So my family, both of my parents started a family practice together. I have like my uncles who, worked within the food space, and they had their own restaurants and bakeries. And I always knew I wanted to be in food, but I didn't necessarily, and I always loved to solve problems, but I didn't necessarily know I wanted to be an entrepreneur until MBA. And within MBA, it was my cohort, my professors, the Scandalera Center was something that's been huge impact, and just everyone's just support, and even just the conversations I've had, they're always eager to connect you to someone to help you take that next step. So I can't really say just necessarily one person. It's really just been a collaboration of everyone throughout the journey.
Yeah, very good. Well, Jordan, back to you. What advice would you give for somebody considering an MBA in order to, if they have a startup or business idea, and why should they consider Ross?
Yeah, I think one of the big things that people can approach the MBA as is a 2-year incubator, right? Like it's super fun, right? Like I love my MBA experience, like you have a great time, but it's also an amazing time to reflect. Like whether you're going from, banking to consulting or going a more traditional recruiting route or entrepreneurship, right? It's 2 years to really refine and reflect and spend the time on what you need to do. So it's actually like the advice I give to a lot of potential people that care about entrepreneurship that want to go into MBAs, like think of it as a 2-year incubator. You're going to be able to get free money. You're going to get amazing support, and you're going to have some of the best people in the world, like, giving you their advice and helping you. So approach it that way. And why Ross? Ross is just such a special place. Like I love everything about it. It's the people, it's the community. And it's one of those things where when you graduate from Ross, you're not just a graduate, you're an alumni, which sounds corny, but it's like you think about the memories of going to the bus and being at the football games and then going to the classrooms, and everything is there. Right. And it's just such a massive alumni network with so many friends that like there's no way you don't have a good time, and you do really truly leave in as an alumni and are always actively trying to help other future Rossers or people that go to Michigan.
Yeah. Jose.
Yeah, I think and it's something that Jordan already said, there's tons of resources, right? If you're an entrepreneur, you want to start something, it's impressive how many resources you can have access to: entrepreneurship centers, competition, your courses, right? So that's, I think, the one. The second, for me, it was just the inspiration, right? When I applied to the program, I felt like, well, I don't have any experience anywhere, just in my business, right? I started my business in college, and I mean, I'm not an investment banker. I don't have any experience at any. So I was a little bit afraid, right? But then you come into a cohort, and just the diversity of thought is amazing, right? And even I thought my ideas weren't like, well, I'm an entrepreneur in Mexico doing food trucks and mezcal. Who's gonna care about what I have to say? But everybody adds up, and everybody's inspiring, and everybody's experience helps, right? And so I think that's the second one, and third one, your professors. I think, and that's why I would recommend ASU. I'm doing a PhD now in management and focusing on entrepreneurship, right? Now that I'm kind of like on this side, the quality of classes, the collegiality, and just the friendliness of my professors at ASU, it was amazing. And also all the staff around the MBA, they were always so helpful, just caring about us as students. It's just amazing how much people cares about you at ASU, and that was my experience. So that's why I would recommend ASU. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Tova, any advice for entrepreneurial MBAs and why they should look at WashU?
Yeah, going back to school is scary. I mean, for me, I was out of school for 7 years working, multiple jobs, and I come back to school, I'm like, wow, this is a shell shock. And so you have, like, similar to what Jose was mentioning, it's almost like an imposter syndrome. It's like, you've been doing this for so long, and then you've got people with these impressive backgrounds. You're like, am I good enough? What am I going to contribute? And then you just have to let yourself go. You have to, take in the opportunity, see the resources that are available, and really just open your mind. And for me, I was someone who was more career switcher. I didn't think that I was going to end up being an entrepreneur. And the amount of just like support that I had, and as I was transitioning from my professors, from my cohort, they really saw what I wanted to be, when even though I thought that I knew gun-ho exactly what I wanted, it's a family. WashU is really a family, and they're there to support you. And even though I've graduated, just like Jordan said, it's not just being graduates and alum. Like you're always going to be part of it. You're always going to have that support as you're moving forward. Like now I work part-time during WashU as I kick up, the startup, just so I have, a financial backing as I move forward. And they offered it, I didn't even ask. So it's just that support and like that knowledge that people are here. And just really, like I mentioned, just the entrepreneurial track and the resources here really help when you're an entrepreneur, or even before you know it. So just really being open-minded, kind of, taking that leap of faith. And even if you're not sure what you want to do or what problem you want to solve, like just remain open-minded.
Yeah. Well, thank you all very much for your time, your expertise, and that great inspiration for all the entrepreneurs out there. You can find more videos from more panelists from other top entrepreneurial programs on our YouTube page. And as always, thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye.